year, everybody. Welcome to 2021. Here's to this year being better than the last.
Better than last.
Thank you for joining us on the Stir podcast and our SIP Shelter in Place series. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin, and hey, Binge Bestie, Debbie Baldwin is here. She is our resident entertainment guru, who also happens to be the author of the romantic thriller False Front and the newly released sequel, which is called Illicit Intent.
I'm very excited about it. It's a bit of a passion project for me because it involves an art heist that I've been kind of obsessed with for a long time, and I've threaded that story into my fictional version of events. So it's a very steamy, very fast-paced romantic thriller. So I hope your readers enjoy it.
Oh, we are waiting with bated breath. And it sounds like another exciting story and plot line. So Debbie, where can readers find the book?
It's available in ebook and in paperback and hardcover on all online booksellers. That includes Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Google Play, Apple, all major online booksellers.
There you go. You heard it from the author's mouth. And so now we are going to continue our discussion of the rich and famous. Last time, Deb, we talked about wealth and excess on display on the big screen with films like The Great Gatsby, The Princess Diaries, Crazy Rich Asians. So this time we're turning our attention to television. And boy, there's some crazy wealth being thrown around on the boob tube as well. Perhaps even crazier than the money, though, is the amount of dysfunction going on in these households. I'm thinking it could have gone on our dysfunction list if you really think about it.
Well, and I mean, it's already, like, television is already skewed a little crazy. I mean, there's always that kind of running joke that Monica and Rachel's apartment in Friends, if I were going to move to New York and rent that apartment or buy that apartment, that it would be $4 million or whatever.
Right. And how do they do it? She was working at a coffee shop. Monica was working at a diner.
Right.
No one could afford that.
Right. So it was her grandmother's rent controlled apartment. That was their way of justifying it. But it's definitely throughout television, there's always this imbalance of income versus lifestyle.
No kidding. No kidding. All right. So we're going to start our list with pretty much a soap opera, primetime soap opera known for its cliffhangers, including perhaps television's biggest cliffhanger.
No question.
Yes. And that is the show Dallas, which aired on CBS.
Who Shot JR?
Who Shot JR, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, Dallas was the original. And I know there were older shows that people loved and had that kind of soap opera feel, but Dallas really defined the genre. Interestingly enough, the story was originally conceived to orbit around the younger brother, Bobby Ewing, played by Patrick Duffy, his wife, Pamela, played by Victoria Principal. But the older brother, JR, played by Larry Hagman, was such a fascinating character in his machinations and evil doings that the producers quickly realized that the show needed to shift and focus more on his storylines. And JR is actually the only character, Larry Hagman, the only actor who appeared in every single episode of Dallas.
Oh, wow.
How do you like that?
Okay, so
13 seasons.
I know, it was on for a long time. And you remember that sprawling South Fork Ranch owned by the Ewings. It was an actual residence called Duncan Acres. and it was owned by a real family. So when the show took off, tourists came by day and night, and it really forced the family to flee. They had to sell the home because they couldn't take it. And today, that house is a museum devoted to the show. So it worked out, except for that poor family.
I know. Well, something tells me they landed on their feet if that's where they started.
Right.
But yeah, and as we said, the cliffhanger, the infamous cliffhanger of who shot JR. JR Ewing, Larry Hagen's character, is shot in mid-show, mid-series. And it was the cliffhanger that everyone was talking about for the entire summer. Now it's funny, it's so different. It would be like the whole season drops, and then the next season,
Right.
I can't wait for the next season to drop and find out who shot JR.
What a hold this show had. We're
Yeah,
still talking about who shot JR. I
yeah,
mean, this was back in the 70s, and this is now, 2020, and that phrase is still
yep.
very, top of mind for us in pop culture. So,
And you really think like Larry Hagman, what a guy. I mean, he started off playing the iconic role in I Dream of Jeannie.
yeah,
So, I mean, what a
right.
career to have these two just unforgettable television roles in his life.
My
So,
gosh, yeah, that's very rare and great, great for him. So, from one oil family to the next, this time we find these two families in Denver, the Carringtons and the Colbys. And we are talking, of course, about Dynasty.
and Dynasty picked up right where Dallas left off. There was a little overlap there.
Yes.
And Dynasty again kind of took it to the next level. You have the fantastic, John Forsythe playing the patriarch of the Carrington family. Also,
Blake
he's the
Carrington,
voice,
right?
Blake Carrington,
Yeah.
and also the voice of Charlie in Charlie's Angels. Um, and his wife, who's all goodness and light, played by Linda Evans, Crystal Carrington. And then the nemesis, Alexis Colby, fabulously played by Joan Collins. And I mean, if you grew up, lived through watching Dynasty on Wednesday nights, I'll never forget it. The cat fights of these women, in full gowns, falling into fountains,
Dripping with jewels, big hair.
jewels. It just did not get any better than this. I mean, that was good TV.
Right. And,
Um,
speaking of Alexa, she is considered one of TV's top villains of all time. And you can't argue with that.
to this day, still, I mean, that fabulous British accent, and Joan Collins. I mean, what a career! She was an established film actress in her own right and a big star before she joined the show, and looked fabulous. Even late in her career, in her finery, to the point where actually the clothes. Did you know this, Trish? That the clothes of the television show Dynasty spawned a fashion line. You could purchase the Dynasty collection in stores.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Wow. Well,
So
I'm not surprised.
it was like the original kind of product placement, commercial
Yeah.
tie-in show. So very
Wow.
forward-thinking Dynasty was.
No kidding. This was fascinating to me as I was like looking into the history of this show. But Joan Collins herself was quoted as saying that she considered Alexis to be the female Donald Trump. And I just couldn't stop laughing at that, considering everything that's happened. She was, quite
That's
accurate.
great. Yeah.
All right,
Um,
Deb, here's a quiz for you.
oh, geez.
Were you keeping track of Alexis's name? What was her
Oh,
name by the end of the series run?
I, I no. I mean, I know there were a lot of them. She married different guys and was hyphenating as she went, but
Alexis Morel Carrington Colby Dexter Rowan.
well done.
Well done. So there you have it. Wow, Dynasty. What a visual. It just, just say the name Dynasty and it's great. So our next TV show takes us out of the 80s and firmly into the 90s. One of my favorite sitcoms, Deb. I remember watching every Monday night this story about a young man from West Philadelphia, born and raised.
Days. Playground is where he spent most of his days.
And we're talking about the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Man, what a great show. Will Smith, that had that total 90s vibe.
Oh
From
my gosh, it was so loud.
I mean, to the house where he moves to in Bel Air. I mean, it's everything about it is so fabulously 90s. And it's just about a kid from the wrong side of the tracks in Philadelphia. If you really want to know what the story's about, just listen to the theme song sung by
Listen
Will
to the
Smith.
thing. Yeah, it pretty
Rapped
much
by Will
tells
Smith.
you. Yeah.
It tells you the whole thing. But moves in with his uncle,
Uncle
played
Phil.
by Uncle Phil, played by James Avery, and cousin Carlton, played by Alfonso
Ribeiro.
Ribeiro, and Ashley, cousin Ashley, played by, I think it's Tatiana Ali, plays that role.
Correct. And
And
then
it's just
Karen Parsons, who was unforgettable as Hillary.
correct. I forgot about Hillary. You just said she was unforgettable, and yet I'd forgotten her. But and it's Will Smith's character, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Fresh Prince, bringing his hometown common sense to this upper class family and solving problems and complicating situations, and it's just a great show.
What I liked about the wealth on display here was it wasn't really on display, save for the fact that they had this English butler, Jeffrey, who probably was my favorite character. He is just great.
I mean, it was funny when you think about it. It's sort of like, who came up with like the British but I mean, it was just a sort of a strange little, and because
Right.
it wasn't really just a normal family, they're just very well off.
Right, exactly. Exactly. You save for the butler.
Yeah.
What I found quite funny was that Uncle Phil, he was an attorney and then later on becomes a judge, but his law firm was called Firth, Wynn and Meyer, but apparently was a play on Earth, Wind and Fire.
Oh, funny.
Of which executive producer Quincy Jones is a fan. And so it's just one of those things, if you watch the shows over and over again, you pick up even more jokes as you watch,
Yeah.
Even with fresh eyes in 2020, it's a great series.
It is great.
All right. So, and also, they recently had a milestone reunion 30 years after the show premiered, and that is still streaming on HBO Max.
All right, good to know. And I think it would be interesting. I think James Avery passed away. Did he not?
Yeah.
But it's always great to, like, I don't know, listen to the actors tell those stories, because
Oh, yeah.
it's always fascinating to me, to be a fly on the wall while they're filming those things and seeing who gets along and who fights.
Right.
And who's
Oh gosh,
difficult.
I highly recommend this reunion show because it finally answers the question, what happened to the first Aunt Viv?
Right. Then
Remember, they had two different ones,
Right.
and this one got pretty heavy.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely a must-see for fans of the show. All right, so our next program really ushered in the teen soap genre, I think, and it was really groundbreaking for that. And it was Beverly Hills 90210, which aired from 1990 to 2000 on Fox.
And this again kind of, spawned a crop of shows,
Yeah.
as these successful shows tend to do all the time. But this original 90210 with Brian Austin Green and Shannon Doherty and Gabriel Carteris and Luke Perry and Jenny Garth and Ian Ziering, was a phenomenon. And actually, I was kind of shocked to read that it did not do well in its first season. And Fox, to garner fans, ran a special summer broadcast of the series, which was hugely successful. And again, this was a new sort of phenomenon when everyone was running reruns over the summer. It took TV networks a long time to pick up on this big 3-month window of opportunity.
That people are
And
craving for something
right.
to watch.
And networks are really still just now learning to take advantage of that.
Right.
Yeah, and 90210 was a great show because what it did is it sort of plumbed the depths of complicated these complicated lives of these teenagers. And it was more than just, oh, I have a crush on a boy, or oh, I'm being bullied. Not to discount those things, but that these kids were going through stuff. I mean, they had issues with their parents that were serious, and they had, you know, things going on that were heavier than I think a normal teen TV show had tackled in the past.
Right.
Viewers related to that, particularly in that demographic, and it was obviously,
Oh
you
my
know,
goodness, it took
changed
off from
America.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so and speaking of the impact that Beverly Hills 90210 had, I mean, this next show, it actually aired on the CW from 2007 to 2012. And, from Beverly Hills, we moved to the Upper East Side of Manhattan for Gossip Girl.
Now, this show again was you as an adult, you watch these shows and think, I mean, these kids, they're living these lives as if they are full adults. And they kind of are. These very privileged Upper East Side Manhattan teenagers. I mean, they're in high
Teenagers,
school.
yeah.
This show really kind of took the concept of the internet and television and merging them. And the show begins with the Gossip Girl website and the narration by the Gossip Girl. It stars a cast, all of whom were hugely famous celebrities at the time this show aired. Blake Lively went on, obviously, to an amazing career. Others did not fare as well. Taylor Momsen, Leighton Meester had, a lot of issues, a lot of tabloid press that was not favorable, and their careers have suffered as a result of that sort of instant fame, which you see happening
I
all
was
the
going to
time.
say, that's the thing, though, with instant fame, especially when you're at that age. It can be
Yeah,
overwhelming. And if you're not the right person to handle that, this kind of thing happens.
yeah. And Penn Badgley, who's gone on to a very successful career, Chase Crawford. So, but what's interesting is that, did you know that this show was originally conceived as a movie
Oh,
starring Lindsay Lohan?
really?
Yes.
Oh.
But it did not pan out, and the producers retooled it into the television show, and to great success.
I was going to say, good decision on their part because it lasted like 5, 6 seasons.
Yes.
So one thing I did find fascinating was the narrator, and it was Kristen Bell.
Yeah, isn't that great? That's cool. I found that out too, and her voice is so recognizable. Once you
Right.
realize her, you're like, of course.
Of course.
But yeah, and this is very much lifestyles of the rich and famous. These kids are living way beyond their years, and they're shopping way beyond their years too.
Yeah, these are teenagers.
Yeah,
And
it
then,
really.
they're all over the East Side, and then they go to the Hamptons. They even go to Paris at one point. So, my gosh, just a lot of wealth being thrown around here.
Yeah, and I think it was an accurate depiction, I have to say.
Wow, must be nice.
I know. Well,
Must be nice. Okay.
from peeking through the windows of Manhattan
So,
apartments.
so speaking of the Hamptons, our next show was set in the Hamptons among rows and rows of just gorgeous beach houses. And we are talking about the show Revenge.
Now, here is something interesting.
Yes.
There is a cast member on Gossip Girl by the name of Connor Paolo, who was a very popular character on Gossip Girl, but the actor repeatedly refused to join the cast as a regular. He only cited personal reasons for not agreeing to do that.
All right.
And then after 4 seasons, he left the show to join the show Revenge, which is
Oh,
the show we're going to talk about next.
okay. But really, he never revealed why?
He just said for personal reasons. He never said why.
Okay.
And so he joins the ensemble cast of Revenge, which is a very interesting and very good show about, loosely based, did you know this? On
The
the
Count
Count
of
of Monte
Monte
Cristo.
Cristo. Yes.
And I say loosely. Wow, loosely.
Very
I think
loosely,
the
but I
fact they're
remember that
both better
very
things.
first trailer when they were promoting this show. I mean, it was just, oh, I want to see that. What is
Yeah,
that all about?
it
Yeah.
was titillating.
Yes.
Absolutely. Madeline Stowe stars, and now this is an interesting concept. Um, she lives in this fantastic over the top Hamptons beach house, and a young woman moved in next door named Emily Thorne, played by the actress Emily Van Camp. And it turns out that Emily is in reality a girl named Amanda Clark, who is back to get revenge on the family that destroyed her father. And her father was imprisoned, I think, for treason.
Yeah,
Was
something to do. He was accused of supporting terrorists or
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah.
and he was set up, and Amanda is back to bring down the family one by one that destroyed her life as a result, and destroyed her father and destroyed her life. She spent her childhood in like juvie or foster
Did. Yes.
care. Yeah. And so,
So
and
wait,
that,
remind me again, how old was Emily supposed to be when she showed up?
I'm gonna say in her early 20s.
Okay, I was gonna say, well, that makes me feel a little better because I'm thinking she was a teenager and she's thought up all these things. And how could you do
Yeah.
that? You're a teenager.
When my kids ask me questions like that, I always say it's television. That's the answer.
Thinking too hard, thinking too hard.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, we talked about the fabulous beach houses in this show. Fashion was another big thing for this show. There was an episode during which Madeline Stowe was outfitted in a 13 pearl necklace worth $100,000. Plus, she had on a Vera Wang dress that was worth $12,000 and a Burberry trench coat over that priced at $8,000. So just do the little mathematics there. And
$25.
that's definitely, wow.
It was my understanding there would be no math.
I'm fine with that.
No math on this podcast.
All right. So our next show chronicles the lives of the Crawleys, led by the Earl and the Countess of Grantham and their servants, and they live on this Yorkshire country estate. And we are all, of course, talking about Downton Abbey.
And I actually just got my 88-year-old mother hooked on Downton Abbey. I think if you ever think like an older person and binge watching, I think she watched all the episodes in like 3 days.
No kidding, really?
And I
So
kept
she
hearing,
was that hooked, down.
and from the next room I kept hearing, "Oh, for goodness sake. Oh, for goodness sake." Like over and over again. I'm like, oh, she's hooked on Downton Abbey. Sisters in love with Downton Abbey.
Oh my gosh.
And so yes, this is early 20th century Britain, and it covers things like World War I and the sinking of the Titanic and all these great world events told through the eyes of the staff, mainly of this wealthy estate. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's a little snoozy for me. I never really got into it, but they're certainly rich. It fits our
Oh,
list.
they're very rich. And you know what? Not just on screen. I mean, even the production of this show is top dollar. I mean, reportedly costing as much as $1.2 million per episode to produce.
And you can really see it. I mean, it's, when you're not spending that kind of money on special effects, like Game of Thrones, for example, of
Yeah.
course, those episodes were expensive. Downton Abbey, the money was spent, you can see it in the costuming and the settings and the film quality and the cinematography, and it's really visually just a beautiful, beautiful show to watch.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just the attention to detail Definitely. Well, your mom is in good company because Queen Elizabeth herself is reportedly a fan of the show. And Her Majesty has actually stayed at Highclere, which is the estate where they shoot, who plays Downton Abbey in the show. So yeah, Downton Abbey, definitely, wow. So this next show, Deb, is one I haven't seen, but I'm intrigued by the premise, and that is the show Billions, which is on Showtime.
Billions is a great show. It is a big, big ensemble cast, but it orbits around the character played by Damian Lewis. And if you don't know who Damian Lewis is, you will when you see him. He's that guy who you're like, oh, him. He's
Damn.
a great actor. He was in the show, I think it was called Life, that only ran for 1 or 2 seasons, about a Los Angeles policeman who was wrongfully convicted.
That sounds familiar. Yeah.
This big settlement from the city. And so was sort of living this very lavish lifestyle and kind of finding his way when his, previous career had been destroyed. And that was a great show that for some reason just didn't get any traction.
Uh-huh.
But in this show, he is a hedge fund manager, and of the ilk of many who have been investigated and found lacking in their legality. He crosses the line. He makes a ton of money. I was trying to think of a non-curse word to use there. Making a ton of money and being investigated by the
U.S. attorney.
the U.S. attorneys. I was going to say Securities and Exchange Commission, but it's the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the character's played by Paul Giamatti.
And you had me at Paul Giamatti because I just love him.
I'm telling you, I mean, what a pairing these two are, and they're so perfect for their roles. Damian Lewis is this sort of slick, sharp guy. His acting style matches that, and Giamatti is gritty. And, you can just see him wanting to bring this privileged SOB down who's the law. It's great.
Okay,
And
so I understand that Paul Giamatti's character is based on Preet Bharara. I don't know if you knew that, but Preet is the one who is still
Yes.
making headlines even after leaving his
Yes.
post as the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
and investigating several hedge fund managers.
Yes, yes.
And yes. And the other thing that's really fascinating about the show and kind of sets it apart is that they have this character. The actress's name is Maggie Siff, and she plays Wendy Rhodes, who is a therapist who on the show joins the hedge fund as, I can't remember what they call her. She's like a professional coach, but she's essentially like an in-house shrink.
Oh, okay.
And so it kind of brings in this Sopranos component, when
Right, yes.
going to seek therapy for his mob, for his angst about being a mob boss. So there's a lot of complexity, and my God, I can't even begin to read the list of this long cast. I mean, you've got these two sort of main characters, but it's really an ensemble cast, and it's a great show. It's riveting, and money. It's the whole show. It's really
Front and center.
Motivates everything, whether it's a rejection of money, a pursuit of money, or dealing with money. It's
right.
It's career, it's personal life. It's a very, very smart show.
And there's 5 seasons so far, which for me personally would make it manageable because it's next on my list, and recently renewed for a 6th season. So that is the show Billions on Showtime. So from Showtime, we're going to jump on over to HBO. And this next show that we're going to talk about is based on Leanne Moriarty's 2014 novel of the same name. And that is the show Big Little Lies.
Okay, so this was the least money, this show, regardless of money in motives, is, I would say, the least about money. it's really about a murder. And
Yes.
so,
But you could tell all the families are money. They are upper class. They live in Monterey, California. You know, the original novel, it was an upper class suburb in Australia, but they moved. And if you are familiar with that zip code, I mean, we're talking some prime real estate in that area along the coast.
yeah, and everyone's very successful, and and it affects the dynamic of all the relationships, the marriages,
Yeah.
the children, and how they function. So it's fascinating, and this involves these sort of day school moms played by Reese Witherspoon and Nicole Kidman and Laura Dern, and Divergent star Shailene Woodley is fantastic in this and almost unrecognizable,
Yes.
as the newcomer in the neighborhood, and their normal routine of sort of planning bake sales and criticizing the teacher for some slight to their,
Picking up their kids in heels, in high heels.
of course, perfectly coiffed.
Yes.
I'm watching and thinking, well, this is certainly not me in the carpool line in the morning, but I know people like that.
Yeah.
Um, and their routine is disrupted when someone is murdered. And unlike a normal sort of whodunit mystery, you don't know right away. Not only you don't know who the killer is, but you don't know who the victim is either. It makes for a
Yes.
very interesting dynamic the way the whole thing unfolds, and kind of puts a new spin on whodunit, which is smart
Very
because
smart.
it can be kind of a tired genre. But this is one way of injecting kind of new life into it, because you sort of need to know who the victim is to play out who the killer is.
Exactly. Which really kept you on edge the entire time, kept your interest definitely.
Yes. And Meryl Streep has an appearance in the later season. Zoe Kravitz is also one of the parents in the film. It's a very engaging show.
Most definitely. And we are awaiting the next season, and we're
Yeah.
hoping that it come out soon. It comes out soon. And again, that is Big Little Lies on HBO. So our next binge-worthy show, definitely, in my opinion, is as perfect as a TV series can be. Also, one of the most expensive television series ever made, with a reported budget of around $6 million an episode, Deb. And that is the mini series The Crown, which is on Netflix.
Uh, that's a staggering number to me. I can't really wrap my brain around. Talk about money
Yes.
and lavish. But this show, The Crown, is phenomenal. Interestingly enough, I just read that the royal family has requested that the show add a disclaimer at the beginning of episodes since the season 4 release, stating that the show is fictitious, or that the show is not a
Not,
docuseries.
yes.
Apparently in season 3, well, I mean, I'm getting, you guys know what happens, right? It's Queen Elizabeth, and she
Yes.
ascends the throne, and it's her sister Margaret and all of her shenanigans. And in season 3, it covers the marriage of Prince Charles and Diana. And apparently, I guess it's I have not watched season 3, but apparently it's fairly sympathetic towards Charles. And apparently in season 4, that is not the case.
No,
And
it's not.
he comes off not looking like the greatest guy. And I guess Camilla and Charles have had to shut off their social media accounts because of the blowback from season 4 of The Crown.
You know what, though? We talked about this from the start. It is television. So you can't expect it to be 100% accurate. And if you've done any reading at all, and I have, because I've just always been fascinated by the royals, and I've read Prince Charles's book that he wrote, and I've read books about Diana, I've read books about Queen Elizabeth, and really, I believe that the creators are trying their best to balance all that. In terms of points of view, in terms of what Diana was really like as a wife, what Charles was like as a husband, because they weren't all saints here. You know, each
Right.
one was at fault about something or the other.
Well, and I always think it's, uh, there's going to be so much trouble when, I think Charles was in love with someone else when he married Diana, who was, I mean, how much younger was she? Was she?
She was 19, I believe, when, they were engaged or something. I mean, she
Right.
was young. She
But
was,
how was he? I think there was a big age difference there, is my
oh,
point.
yeah.
So, I mean, I kind of am willing to give Charles a break on the everything kind of going to shit in that marriage, because he married her out of obligation, and it was sort of doomed to fail from the start, even though we were all so caught up in that whole thing. I mean, do you remember that wedding?
Yeah,
It like nothing.
I was still in the Philippines when that happened, and I made it a point to get up, the time difference, just to sit in front of the TV and watch that wedding.
Yeah.
And it was crazy enough to get my hair at the time was past my butt. And I was crazy enough to get the Princess Di hair um, the next
I
day.
need a picture. I need to see a picture.
Oh my gosh. And so guess what happened? So when that happened, it was my aunt who took me to the salon. When my dad got home that evening, did not go well. Did not go. I don't think he talked to me for a week. He was so upset that my hair was gone. He was so upset. He did not talk to me for a week. Gave me the dirtiest look as he was getting out of the car. Awful. It was awful. But, I mean, that's how huge an event that was.
It was huge. I mean, uh, as I said, it made William and Kate's wedding look like a nothing, and that was a big deal for
Yeah.
my kids. But for us, like people getting up at all hours of the night, watching that on television, that dress. I mean, it's all fresh in my mind. It was momentous.
So for those of you who are fans of like all that fashion, especially that wedding dress, there was actually an exhibit put on by the Brooklyn Museum last month called The Queen and the Crown. And they focus on the fashions from The Crown and the show The Queen's Gambit, which another one, talking about fashion, just kind of getting off track here. But just to look at all those fashions and looking at all the details, I mean, even some of, especially Queen Elizabeth's outfits through the years, and just the attention to detail that this show has,
Yeah.
invested in it.
Yeah.
All right. So, Deb, what could be bigger than The Crown? Perhaps it's our final TV show on the list. Talk about dripping in excess. Just the opening credits give you a peek into how wealthy this family is. I mean, elephant rides on the lawn, private jets and helicopters. My goodness, even the music, the theme music sounds like it's oozing with entitlement.
Yeah.
And we are talking about the show Succession, which is on HBO.
And this is really sort of the ultimate television show about how money warps a family dynamic. And you can see in in smaller degrees real life stories of families having falling out over an inherit. The great aunt Millie died and she left only one cousin the $5,000 and nobody talks anymore. So multiply that by 50 million or whatever. And you've got Succession, which is loosely based on the Rupert Murdoch family, which is the Australian media billionaire. And the patriarch of the Succession family is played by Brian Cox. And then he has his children. And it's the story of how the Brian Cox character is in ill health, and how the company and the money is going to pass to the next generation. And man, it is dark. It is fascinating.
It is indeed fascinating. The conversations that they have as a family are conversations you and I won't ever have, talking about how this is going to be transferred to this and how you're going to sign that. And oh my gosh.
It's like, you know, that little emoji of your head blowing up? That's kind of what you feel like, because it's not, they're not the 1%. Like, you take the 1%, they're like the 1% of that 1%. It's crazy. And then you have this amazing cast all embracing, like climbing into the skin of these characters with so much believability that it really makes the show. Because if these actors are not buying into this reality, and it rings false in any way, you lose your viewers instantly. But this is so wonderfully written and so well done. And, you know, Kieran Culkin, who we talked about over Christmas week.
Yes.
Made his debut as Little Fuller, the cousin who wets the bed in Home Alone with his brother Macaulay.
Now he's all grown up, and he's so different from that character. Oh my gosh. Yes, he plays Roman,
yes.
Roman Roy, and he is fantastic in this show.
Yes.
And of course, the actor who plays his older brother, Jeremy Strong, won the Emmy for Best Actor, and he so deserved it. And, you know, I had read something about his preparation for taping episodes. He really gets into that character. He's really serious about it.
And I can imagine, I mean, as dark as it is, it's still got to be fun, because it's so different from any other reality. You know, any actor would probably know that it's just such a different world. It would be like playing an alien in a sci-fi film or something. You know what I mean? It's just be very cool. It's got to be a very cool part to play. And these actors are great. The cast is amazing. And Brian Cox too.
Yes, like, as the patriarch, yes. And my gosh, you know, it's won so many awards. The big winner from the recent Emmys, it won Best Outstanding Drama, won the BAFTAs, won the Golden Globes, among other accolades.
Well deserved too.
Yeah. And you were the one who got me hooked on this show. It's unbelievable. I can't wait for the next season. I am on edge, you know, after that cliffhanger.
I know, you're like, hurry up and film.
Exactly. So that is the Roy family in succession. Again, you can find that on HBO, and you can also find that on HBO Max. So my head is spinning, Deb. I mean, what a list. So this list, in tandem with our previous list of the rich and famous on the silver screen. And so for our treat, we decided to piggyback as well when it comes to our sweet treat this week. So we recently brought you the Nutella chocolate chip cookies. This week, for those of you who prefer your Nutella in bar form, we have Nutella crumble bars. And it is so easy to make. Of course, you'll have Nutella and, you know, or whatever hazelnut spread that you prefer. Plus, you just add brown sugar, butter for the crumble and the crust. So easy and just delightful. Just delightful.
I mean, if I still got high, and that sounds like something I would really want to be eating late at night.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I sampled it with my family and they were hooked.
I mean, there's not a bad ingredient in the list.
No, not at all. And you know, it's healthy because it has oats in it.
Right, there you go. And nuts.
Yes, it's heart healthy. So there you have it. And also, if you really want to go totally all out with our theme here, all you have to do is sprinkle some of those edible 24 karat chocolate shavings as part of the crumble, you know, have at it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, can we dip it in caramel and add a scoop of ice cream?
Why not? Why not?
And now we're getting into elf territory. We squeeze maple syrup over it.
Oh my God.
Pop-Tart.
Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Debbie, for sitting in with me as always.
Thank you, Trish. I'm so excited, and I'm so excited for Illicit Intent to come out for the readers who are interested in a very action-packed page turner. If anybody has a book club that they want to choose Illicit Intent for, I would be happy to join you for a discussion. So thank you so much for mentioning it, and I will see you hopefully next week while we talk about some more movies.
All right. Thanks, Deb. And thank you all for watching. We will see you again next time. Bye.
Bye.